This is Krish Mohip, and he is here and will tell you a little about himself, so I'm not going to take any of his time in doing that, but I again want to just extend the board's thank you for being here. And I think what we'll do is we'll just get started again with introductions, and then if you can tell us a little about yourself, and then we'll do the questions like we've done before.
Sure.
So any questions about process from anybody or any ideas for improvement? If not, we'll get started. We're good? All right.
Hi, I'm Claudia Sanchez, and I'm a mom of 3 kids in the Boulder School District.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, my name is Veronica San Gabriel, and mother of high school student in St. Carlos High School in Lafayette.
Hi, I'm Adam Galvin, principal of Summit Middle Charter School here in BVSD, and I have 2 students in the district.
Welcome, my name is François-Pierre Fournier, or FP, and I represent the District Accountability Committee, and I also have a son at Heatherwood Elementary.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm the middle school representative. Hi, I'm Bianca Gallegos, principal at Columbine, and I also have 2 children in BVSD.
I'm Robin Fernandez, and I'm the Executive Director for Elementary School Leadership.
Hello, I'm Lori Canova. I'm the President and CEO for the I Have a Dream Foundation of Boulder County, and I also am a product of Boulder Valley School District and had 2 kids that went through the district.
I'm Ari Gerzon-Kessler, the Director of Parent and Family Partnerships, and also a product of Boulder Valley.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Jackman, Principal at Loft Elementary School, and I also have 2 students in Boulder Valley School District.
Welcome, I'm Shannon Newmare. I'm the 504 coordinator and ADA coordinator for the district. I also have a middle school son.
Hi, welcome. My name is Dennis Rastetter. I'm the Executive Director of Special Education for the school district.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Roy Holloway. I'm the Director of Humanities, Federal Programs, and Extended Learning for the district.
Got a lot of jobs. So I guess this is where I get to talk about.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just moving the mic.
I guess this is where I get to talk about myself, and this is very awkward. I'm just going to say, sitting down using a mic. I don't think I've ever done this. So let me know if you can't hear me if I start moving it too far. But I do want to take a little bit of time, and this is going to eat into the question time, to tell you a little bit about myself. And if you've heard this already, then probably come back 15 minutes from now because you don't want to sit through it again. It almost hurts me to go through the story one more time. But to really know me and understand me, it's to understand where I come from and what makes me me and why I'm even in this role or sitting in this seat. And it really goes back to my family and my parents. I'm first generation to this country. Both of my parents are from Trinidad and Tobago. My dad and my mom both grew up in poverty, but my dad grew up in about the diest of poverty types of situations you could ever imagine. Grew up in Trinidad in the country in a house up on stilts. His bed was made out of coconut husks or something. I don't even know how you make that, but that's how he lived. With, I believe, 9 other brothers and sisters. I lost track because there's so many of them. And he was blessed because he had a really good brain. He was a really smart person, and that led to opportunities. And so he essentially went to some of the best schools in Trinidad. He went to the best school and the best high school. He graduated at the top of his class, and he was set for success because he had everything he needed. Except he didn't have everything he needed because he didn't have role models in his life. His parents never made it past 3rd grade. And there was no expectation for higher education. So he did what everyone else in the village did, and he went and he worked at the oil fields. And so he was in that job for about 5 years. There was one morning he wasn't feeling well, he didn't go to work, and that was the same day that there was a massive explosion in his sector, and everyone he worked with died. And so, saying as my dad is very smart, he didn't go back to work after that. He decided that he was going to come to this country and put himself through school and follow his passion. He has always liked science. So he came to Chicago. He went to the University of Illinois at Chicago, and he was able to get a bachelor's degree. He continued on in his education, and he got a master's degree and then finally a doctorate. And he worked as a college biology professor for over 32 years. In that time where he was going through his education, between his bachelor's and his master's, I believe, he went back to Trinidad because he wanted to get married. Apparently he was not having any luck in Chicago, so he went back home, asked his parents to hook him up. And so essentially my grandparents knew each other They introduced my mom to my dad. He went over to the house, they talked, and they hit it off. And so next week, my dad called my mom on the phone and asked her to marry him. And she said yes. And so the third time my dad met was a week later at their wedding. And, in the course of a month, my mom went from teaching kindergarten in a Catholic school in Trinidad to living in Chicago with what I would imagine would be a stranger in a one-bedroom apartment on the north side that my dad shared with another couple. So my mom really went through some changes in the course of a month. And my mom was excited to come to this country, and there was better opportunities for her. And she wanted to get back to teaching. She was a kindergarten teacher in Trinidad. She wanted to get back to that. And then so she realized that her college diploma wouldn't transfer and her teaching certificate wouldn't either. And she realized if she wanted to teach again, she had to go back to school. My dad wasn't all that interested. He wanted to start a family. But she never gave up on that dream. So it took her 10 years and 4 kids later. And she finally got her certificate and went back to school and continued her education. And so my mom ended up with 2 master's degrees, one in special ed, one in early childhood, and taught for 25 years in the Chicago public schools. I say that story for 2 reasons. One is that what I've learned from my dad. I learned from my dad that education is the only guarantee to success in life, that you can escape any situation if you are well educated. From my mom, I learned that sometimes education isn't enough. You have to have perseverance. You have to have grit. Because my mom easily could have given up on her dreams and not gone back into teaching and never really fulfilled what it is that she wanted to do. So I benefited from both of my parents. I got to learn from and see some great mentors. I also had 2 older brothers and a sister who were National Honor Society, straight A students, all got full rides to college. So I was bringing up the rear, and I was a baby in every sense of the word. And so I just, benefited from the expectations that were put on me because everyone just assumed I was smart, so I didn't have to work that hard. I got A's and B's, and I was doing well. I was really close with my sister. I was that tag-along little brother that just followed the sister, who was 4 years older, around everywhere and just tormented her. And so we had a really close bond. And so as I was getting ready for high school that summer before, my sister got pretty sick. And within 3 weeks, she had passed. And 2 weeks before I had to start high school, I cremated my sister. And then I had to go to high school. And I was extremely depressed. And even though I was an extremely smart individual, I was getting C's and D's. I would have had F's, but the coaches wouldn't let me fail. So sports was the only thing keeping me going. I would come home every day after school, and I would sneak into my sister's bedroom. I would bury my head in her pillow, and I would cry myself to sleep every single day because I never wanted anyone to know, especially my parents, how affected I was. I was masking that pain and that trauma because I didn't necessarily know what else to do. And I didn't want to tell my mom because I think seeing my mom cry was harder than me crying myself. It's just something I never wanted to do. So I was coming out of that depression towards the end of my sophomore year, and I realized that I wanted to better my life. I wanted to follow in my brothers and my sister's footsteps and, be an honor student, be in National Honor Society, get a scholarship to college. So I went to go see my counselor. And so I went to go see Ms. K. And I said, Ms. K, I haven't been trying, I've had some personal tragedy. I finally feel like I can kind of move into this, kind of step into the roles of honors and AP classes because I know that I can do it. And she told me no. She said she didn't believe I had the skills necessary. And she told me with any luck, I can get a 2-year degree and that I should think about maybe doing something in the skilled trades because I'm good with my hands. And even though there's nothing wrong with that, it's not what I wanted for myself. And I was just so distraught because it was the first time I came forward saying I wanted to do something and I wanted to be better than I was. And I was just flat out rejected. And so I had tears in my eyes leaving that guidance counselor's office. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mr. Anderson, who was my sister's counselor. He was in charge of the guidance department. And so he called me into his office and I explained to him what happened. And he told me that, he essentially said he was waiting for me to start believing what he already knew about me, that I was resilient, that I was smart, and that I could do it. He said, I'll give you a semester to prove yourself. So he put me in all honors classes, And I got straight A's that semester. I continued throughout my entire high school career, all A's and B's, honors and APs, and found myself in a situation where I could go to college, where in the past I probably wasn't. I still wasn't there yet. I think I still had some of the effects of depression. And so I didn't fill out one single application to go to college. My mom did for me. And she also filled out at this one college, they were having a scholarship competition. And all you had to do was go write an essay. And so my mom bribed me with money to go to this small little school in Iowa and write an essay. So I'm writing the essay, is essentially what do you want to major in, what do you want to do with your life. And so I'm talking about going into pre-med because I want to become a doctor. Not only do I look the part, but I wanted to then go and figure out what, somebody got my joke, figure out what my sister died from. She had an autoimmune disease. She was the second person in the world to die from it, and I wanted to know why. So I'm writing this essay, and then I stopped. And then I started thinking about how I got into that chair that day writing that essay and how close I was to not being there. And thinking about everything that I had going for me. My dad has his doctorate, my mom has 2 masters, my siblings are extremely intelligent. I almost let a school counselor determine my future, but thankfully somebody else in the school stepped in front of that person and helped me get to where I needed to be. So even though I had that great family structure, I still needed the school system, or at least somebody in that school, to believe in me. And that's what I wrote my essay about the relationships that have to happen in school, how we have to educate our students a little bit differently, because I was bored through school throughout. And at that point, I was realizing that education was really where my passion was. And so I ended up winning the presidential scholarship off of that essay if I chose to go into education, and I did. And 4 years later, I graduated, and it came to time to decide what I wanted to do. And I decided I wanted to work in the inner city. I went and I became a kindergarten teacher in the Chicago Public Schools, in a very diverse school on the north side, 33 different languages spoken, and I found myself teaching a classroom of predominantly Hispanic students that didn't speak English. And just seeing great success come from those kids. I got moved quickly into administration. I was a teaching assistant principal for many years. And then I can't remember if I was dating my wife or if we were married at that point. But I said to her, listen, by the time I'm 40, I want to be a principal. So I'm going to put my resume out just to hopefully, maybe in a couple of years, I'll get an interview. I just want to see what that process is. There were 4 jobs open at that point in Chicago. I applied to all 4, and I got 2 interviews and I got 2 job offers. One was a school right next to Wrigley Field, which is great for a 28-year-old. And the other was on the south side in a school called Walsh Elementary. 95% low income, 95% Hispanic, and one of the lowest performing schools in the area. I couldn't get there fast enough. That just sounded like so much fun to me. So I went and I started working in that school and realizing that there were a lot of needs: educational, social, emotional, wraparound services, health and nutrition. And so I invested so much into that building. And so within 5 years, we were outperforming the regional gifted school that all the kids were bused to. We were outperforming them, and they were just like half a mile down the road. And so I was really excited about what we were able to do, because we were really transforming lives of children. And so I took a school that was in the mid-50s, brought that all the way up to the mid-80s as far as percentiles of students that were achieving proficiency. So I was really excited about that work. The superintendent was also excited about that work and asked me to join a new department she was forming, which was a transformation unit, and essentially taking the most struggling, most violent, most challenged schools in Chicago and bringing them into one unit so we could provide intensive support, professional development for teachers, leadership and instructional leadership coaching for principals, and just really redesigning and transforming schools. A few months later, she offered me another 12 schools, and then by the end of the year, she asked me to take over that entire department. So at that point, I was leading one of the largest transformation units in the country, and just having a lot of fun with it too. And so within 2 years, she was giving me 3 years to get this work done. Within 2 years, we transferred back 24 of the elementary schools, a few of the high schools in there, I should say, because they were performing so well. And then the only schools I kept were the ones that were still in the school improvement grant. About a year later, I got a call from the state of Ohio. They were interested in doing their first state takeover. in Youngstown, Ohio, and they were asking me to come be their CEO. It was an interesting idea that they brought, and I went in there. And it's one of the lowest performing schools in the country. It was just ranked the poorest city in the country. And I spent the last 2 years building sustainable practices because I knew that this was never going to be a long-term plan for me. It's too difficult of a job for someone to do for 5 years. But what I wanted to do was go in there and build sustainable practices. And so really proud of the fact that we rebuilt the entire central office. We rebuilt our senior leadership team. We rebuilt building leadership teams last year so that this year we could create the space needed so that we could have accelerated student growth. So within the first 4 months of the year, we used what's called the NWEA assessment. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but we saw a 5% increase in reading in the first 4 months and a 4.5% increase in math. So we know that things are on the trajectory that they need to be, and it's the appropriate time for me to start looking to go to a different district. And so I guess the question that everybody wants to know is, what has prepared me to be in Boulder? And why do I even want to be in Boulder? Because all of my work has been low income, has been essentially serving students of color. And I have 3 answers for that. And it's Noah, Bella, and Riley. Those are my children. I have 7-year-old twins, Noah and Bella, and I have a 5-year-old daughter named Riley. And when I became a dad, my whole outlook on life changed. I mean, anyone that's a parent, I'm sure that's happened. But my entire outlook changed on the academic side as well, because we were, living in one of the, a very affluent part of Chicago on the North Shore. Our kids were going to some of the best schools in the state. And we brought them to kindergarten at reading at a 3rd grade level. And so, we went to the first parent-teacher conference, and they're just talking about socialization and making sure the kids are happy. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe that's for the first 2 weeks, but let's, this is 2 months in. What are we really talking about? And then I go to the second parent-teacher conference, and again, we're not talking about, you have a child that's at a 3rd grade level, and this is how we're getting to a 4th grade level. And so I became frustrated. And so my wife doesn't allow me to go to that school anymore. But I am frustrated because we're not focused on the right things. And I don't care that we have children that, their school district is one of the highest performing, but we're not having the conversations around growth. The children may be high performing because we brought you high performing children. But what are you doing to move those children even further? So how are you diagnosing a child at the beginning of each year to say, this is the level that your child is at now, and this is the projected target that they should get to by the end of the year? And the work along that entire year is how we're progress monitoring to make sure that they're going to meet that growth target. That's the conversation I want to have, because that's the conversation we need to have. And it doesn't matter if you're in a low income situation, if you're a high income situation, or anywhere in between. Every child needs to have a growth target that they meet. And we have to know that if you bring your child to this school, they're going to grow at least 1 full academic year. And so that's what has really re-inspired me to be in different types of situations and be in different types of school settings. Because at the end of the day, growth is the hardest for children that are high achieving. And I've seen that at the principal level. It's really easy to move a child from the 55th percentile to the 60th percentile. It's really hard to move a child from the 85th percentile to the 90th percentile. And that's why I want to come here, because I want to bring my experiences around creating the culture and creating the norms that are needed so that we can accelerate student growth. Not to say that we're not doing it already, but how can we do it at an even deeper level? And so that's essentially where I am and why I'm sitting here in this seat, have the audacity to come to Boulder, saying that with my experience as low income, I could also add to the value of your school district. I also know that here in Boulder there is an opportunities gap. I say opportunities gap, not achievement gap, but there is an opportunities gap that we have to solve, because we have students in this district that are low performing and aren't meeting those growth targets. And we need to find ways to make sure that not just that subgroup, but all subgroups are finding ways to grow and to achieve at the highest level.
Okay, first question. What is your vision around... First question. What is your vision around narrowing the achievement gap? What are the few concrete steps you will take to tackle this challenge in your first year? And how may families and the community be part of this action plan?
So I just answered this question on Wednesday, except it took me 3 hours. So
We don't have that much.
we don't have that much time. Thank you for pointing that out. So I think it's, what are the actions about reducing the achievement gap? I think that's the first part. And so I think there's a few things that make up what I would consider a comprehensive academic approach to making sure that you have that. And I think the first thing is having clearly defined what successful teaching looks like in a school. Once you have that defined, it's then creating a comprehensive professional development system so that teachers are providing the appropriate resources and the appropriate development so that they can improve in their instructional delivery. The next thing is having that comprehensive assessment system where we're measuring our children. Don't be afraid when I say assessment. It's assessment with a lowercase a, not a capital A. I'm not looking at that high stakes testing. I'm saying formative assessments that are happening every day in the form of a one question exit slip that's matching the purpose statement that we had for that day, or some type of interim assessments or benchmarking that we're doing for our children. We need to make sure that we have a comprehensive assessment that diagnoses children, that includes formative assessments, summative assessments, and progress monitoring, so that we ensure that our children are learning, and if they're not, we can put the interventions in place so that they can. Once you have that built, you also then have to have an accountability system, lowercase a, where you're just providing ongoing feedback to teachers, to principals, to buildings, to senior leaders, to the entire district on how we're doing. Once you have all of those built, I always kind of reference to riding a bike. The fun is building it, the hard part is pedaling, and it's the monotony of doing that day in and day out, of ensuring that you have high quality instruction in every single classroom for every single child every single day. Because from my experience, it just takes one mediocre teacher in the course of 12 years to really derail a child. And when you have that, you are going to spend 4 times the amount of dollars educating that child through interventions because they missed an opportunity during 1 year. So it's really about ensuring quality. It's really about defining quality, building the capacity so that you can build the capacity of your entire staff to get there, hold everyone accountable to it, and then celebrate the growth as it happens. Now, you had more questions in there, so please help me with what the next one was.
I think you didn't tell us
How
might the families or the community be a part of this action?
Yeah, so I think what's very important is that I'm not going to come in here and define what I think we need to do. I think part of it is me being the conduit between the community and the school system to help define what it is that we want to do and what we expect from our children. I think one of the first things we need to do is build a quality profile of what a BVSD child should be. What is that child should be able to do by the time they graduate from BVSD, and then build a strategic plan around that. I think when you're building a strategic plan, you have to listen to all areas and all stakeholders and all interest groups. When I was building the strategic plan in Youngstown, that year I had over 95 community meetings to take input, and the strategic plan was very in depth. I have 5 goals in my strategic plan. It's the first 2 are around. The first one is academics. The second one is essentially around the whole child. The third is about parents and family involvement and community involvement. The fourth is truly building a world-class workforce of certificated and non-certificated employees. And the fifth is having solid foundations, operations, finances, things like that. Once you have that, and I see that you have it on your website, you have something, you have some goals outlined, I would take that to a much deeper level. So the plan I have in Youngstown is about 86 pages, and we start with those goals. We break those goals down into 4 or 5 objectives each. We break down every objective into 5 or 6 action steps, and then all those action steps are aligned to some type of metric that we're going to measure. I think as we're building that, the entire community has to come to the table and help us define what it is that we want to do, how we're going to get there, and what measures we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. And that goes for academics, and that will help us define what approach we're going to take to close that achievement gap.
Thank you.
Second question. How do you plan to ensure cultural proficiency for all Boulder Valley School Districts, teachers and staff?
Did you say culturally proficient?
Cultural proficiency.
Well, I think it's essentially ensuring. I was talking about this in the other panel. One thing is that we want to start being able to call out our biases that exist. So in every organization that I've been in, we've gone through equity traps training to help people understand what an equity trap is, and also how to then call people out when people are saying things that are around their own personal biases. I think it's also important, though, as we're doing that, it's also important to then celebrate the cultures that exist within our district. You don't just celebrate it, like you don't just do Black History Month in February, you do it across the entire year. But then also, as you have school districts that are, or individual buildings that are rich in one culture, you want to make sure that that's evident throughout the building. My first principalship was in Pilsen. Pilsen was very much Mexican, more than anything, about 95% of the kids were. And so we looked for ways to celebrate the culture through the curriculum. So we weren't just reading books, we made sure to read books from various cultures, and we highlighted those that came from Hispanic and Mexican authors. Looking at different celebrations, looking to really build some, just to build knowledge and experiences for children. We always did some type of international events at every school that I was in, where kids would learn about different countries and present that throughout the school to the family. So I think it's just important, one, to make a child feel comfortable in their building so that they feel that they're part of the community through the academics, but also to take time to celebrate all cultures that exist in our world.
We're at the halfway point.
Okay.
And we have about 13 more questions.
It's a common problem I have.
Okay. Given the uncertain nature of funding for special education, how should BVSD ensure continuation of post-high school transition programs? And what would be your plan to ensure adequate funding for special ed students in our district?
Well, first of all, I already answered this question, so I'm not going to again. I'm just joking. Man, this is a tough crowd. Anyways, so first of all, it's not a choice. You don't get to say, you know what, I think I'm going to adequately fund special ed this year, as opposed to not. There's a federal mandate that we do, and when you don't, you're going to face even more sanctions, and you'll spend more money in due process. So you have to make that a priority when you're going through the budgeting. We simply cannot say that there's not money for special education, because it's a federal mandate that we do, or you can lose funding and you could be sanctioned. I think what you also have to understand as you're going through your budgeting process is that unfortunately there's never enough money for the special education services that we are required to provide. So you're going to have to look at how are you using other funds to support the needs of our children. When it comes to post-secondary, I don't think it just matters for students with special needs. I think it's for all of our children. I know we have a Naviance program that we're using here in Boulder Valley, but really, how are we setting aside, do we have college and career coaches in our high schools that are working and planning with our kids as early as 9th grade so that we have them on a path and we understand what is it that they want to do? We have career tech, we have military, we have vocational, we have academics in college and career. We have to understand what is it a child wants to do and make sure we put them on that path. At no point should we steer all special education students into one path, because that would be a bias or a prejudice that we have around our students. And so essentially, I think to answer that question, I think it's essentially is what is it that we're doing not just for our special education, but for all of our students, but ensuring that we have a special focus on certain demographics.
Question number 415. What are your thoughts on the relationship between public education and social justice?
So I believe heavily in social justice. So I walked into Youngstown schools, and what I saw was that we were out of school suspending our students 10 times the average than any other district in the state of Ohio. What I came to understand was that we truly weren't understanding our children. We weren't understanding trauma. We didn't understand that students were responding and reacting because of chemical changes in their brain from trauma, and that we had to not only teach our students how to de-escalate, but we also needed to teach our educators the same. So I looked at a lot of work with social emotional learning. I work with an organization called CASTLE, which works in some of the top districts across the state. I'm a partner with them in Youngstown. I'm pretty sure it'd be easy to have them be a partner here in Boulder Valley. I don't think they are right now. But we also looked at some other things like meditation as well. So I work with Inner Explorers around meditation. I also think it's important to teach empathy. I think empathy is something that we could teach our children like we would teach reading and math, because we need our children to start developing an understanding for a care for each other. I think in our world right now, there's not enough of that. I think we don't think about each other. I think that we don't understand how our actions affect other people. And I think that's part of the reason we see some of the violence in our schools. Not just talking about shootings, but just all the violence and all the behaviors that we're seeing is because students aren't thinking about and children aren't thinking about how their actions affect each other. So I think social justice is a great thing. I kind of lump in social justice and restorative practices together because I think they're so intermixed. But essentially, you have to. It's something that you have to explicitly teach, and then you have to embed in the curriculum throughout the school years.
Please describe your experience and results in closing the achievement gap for minority and first-generation students. What were the strategies and how can they be applied to the achievement gap here in BVSD?
Yeah, so again, that's another 3-hour answer. I'll cut down to about 5 minutes. But it really goes back to, I think I kind of answered some of this already around, really what does it take to improve the achievement gap. When you're talking about first generation in general, I think you have to go beyond the student and reach out to families as well. So, how are we helping our parents become the first teachers at the home? How are we engaging them to get better jobs for themselves? How are we helping them if they don't have a high school diploma? How are we helping them with GED? How are we helping them with language acquisition? How are we helping them improve their job skills and interviewing? And then also connecting them to opportunities so that they can improve the lives of their children through better economic situations and maybe even more time at home with the family. So, in addition to what I've talked about around academics, I think it's that going beyond the student and engaging with the family so that they're better prepared to help their child.
Question number 6. How do you see achieving the goal of equity and excellence with low-income minority students and families?
So I think it has to, and I don't think it has to. I mean, I know it has to. We have to have a courageous conversation here in Boulder if we haven't had it already, because oftentimes we talk about equality and equity in the same breath, and they're very different things. For our students of color or our students that are struggling, they don't need equal treatment. They need equitable treatment, and that means equitable resources and equitable time. And it doesn't necessarily mean more money, but it may mean different human capital. It may mean different autonomies. And I'll bring up the example of what I did when I was a principal and when I was a chief and what I'm doing now as a chief executive officer. Is we have a lot of students that struggle in literacy. And so one thing we were able to do is, dependent upon the school, we changed the time distribution for our children so that they can have more time engaging in literacy instruction. So if you want to have a district where every child reads for 90 minutes a day in a reading block, but these children are struggling, you need to find ways to enhance that time, to give them 3 hours of reading if that's what's necessary, to integrate reading across the subject areas. So those are ways that you can provide some type of equity that doesn't necessarily cost money or shift resources, because I think that's also a hard conversation to have in a community, but probably will need to happen because resources do sometimes need to follow, and money does need to follow students at times. But we just have to figure out how we do that without damaging other children. And so how do we continue to promote our talented and gifted and fund those initiatives there while providing the resources needed for our most struggling?
Question number 7. How have you utilized and leveraged community partnerships to positively impact student achievement?
So right now I'm working with United Way of Youngstown, the Youngstown area, to really run all of my enrichment after school programs. And so we do a 25-75, so I put in 25%, they add in 75%. And right now, I mean, we're a small district, but about 60% of our elementary age students are staying for after school. We run a 2.5-hour after school program. We bus them home, we give them a snack and a dinner. And that has significantly increased our achievement scores for our students. We see a year's worth of growth in our students that go to the after-school program in reading, and we saw 3/4 a year of growth in math. So, that's one example, but there are so many organizations that are out there. The struggle that I found coming into Youngstown was that the school district was difficult to work with. So you have to be able to ensure that you have some type of structure in place that those that want to come in to work with the district are doing so in a manner that is easy for both and is beneficial. The struggle also is that you have to also understand how to say no to some people. So there are there's essentially an education program in every corner, in every block in that community that wants to come in. But they have to align to our strategic goals, and they have to align with our mission and vision. And we have to be able to vet them, so when they don't, we can bless them and say, continue to do great work, just not with us, and then go deep into the ones that we really want to invest in.
How would you make an impact on the teacher shortage, especially for teachers of color?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, essentially there's a lot of things that you can incentivize a teacher to come into your district. I think part of it, though, is also building your own program and identifying your own children and trying to have them come back into the district. I think here in Boulder, in Boulder Valley, I think you're at an advantage because you do have really competitive salaries. You have schools and communities that people want to work in. And it's just ensuring that you are providing the highest quality teacher to the child and ensuring that we have children that kind of make up a reflection of what that school building looks like. I think that's important as well. And it's a tricky question to answer. I'm not going to sacrifice quality to fill a racial quota, but I'm also going to actively and aggressively reach out to ensure we have buildings that reflect our student populations.
What risk would we be taking if you were offered the position of superintendent?
I mean, you're going to risk more and more children wanting to come back because we're going to have the very best district in the country. I mean, and I don't know if you guys want to go down that road. But no, I think the risk is, and I have to guard against that myself, is I'm very passionate in what I do. And I'm very data driven, and sometimes that scares people. I don't think it needs to scare people. I just need to make sure that we build the systems in place that everyone understands when we give feedback, it's to encourage growth and not to drop a hammer down on anybody. I think we're going to have to move past, some of my past experiences, I think, could scare people. I was doing turnaround work for the past 15 years, basically. I'm doing a state takeover right now. And, I was talking to cabinet today, and I said, don't let that fool you. Like, that's not me. I'm a very collaborative person. I think, it's not much as a risk, but it's an unknown for Boulder because I haven't worked in this specific population. But I truly do know leadership, I do know organizational change, and I do know instruction. And I could bring that to this community to really propel it. And I don't joke, like when I come into this district, saying that we are not at the highest level. We are not the #1 district in Colorado at this point. I think we should be. I think we have everything we need. When I walk into those schools today, when I look at our budget, when I look at the quality of teaching, when I look at the opportunities being provided, when I see the families that we have, there's no question in my mind that we can quickly get there. And then when we get there, I'm going to then say, well, why aren't we best in the country? And then when we get there, I'm going to say, well, being the best in the country makes us the 14th best in the world. So we need to keep moving. So I guess another struggle you'll have with me is I definitely am always looking to improve.
What is your vision for improving our school district to become a top school district in the nation? That was right on there.
Do you want me to say it again?
Happy to move on here. What do you think about having full-day preschool in all elementary schools in BVSD?
I feel like that's a loaded question, right? Because I think everybody wants full-day. Who wouldn't want full-day preschool? So, what I did when I was in Youngstown is I did bring full-day preschool, and we saw a 30% enrollment increase because we had full-day preschool. But we also had the resources to do it. So we have to make sure, we have to look at the budget, and we have to look at our priorities to ensure that we can do that without causing, a financial deficit or take away from some of the other programs. But we could also then look at to see, are there some programs that we're not getting the return on the investment that we would expect to see? And should we double down then on early childhood? I mean, I'm an educator. I used to teach kindergarten. I am very much a proponent of full-day kindergarten and full-day preschool. But that would have to be something we look to the community to see if they even want. And if they do want it, if it's something that we could provide. But it's hard to argue providing more instructional time and more opportunities for our earliest learners.
Question number 12. Can you tell us about the balance you would strike between being involved in our community and serving as an internal manager of all of our school district's personnel and programs? Which is more important, and how do you strike the right balance?
So I think it's determined upon where we are in the organization, right? So I see myself as a superintendent as a conduit between the community and the school district. And you really can't separate the school district and the community because they're so integrated. I think you need somebody to be out in the community that is championing what's happening in the district and bringing in more opportunities for our students. I also think that as you're doing this work, it's just so important that you have a strong cabinet and senior leadership team that allows you to be able to go out and do that. I see myself in the role of a superintendent as not as a day-to-day manager, not a manager in any stretch of the imagination. You're a visionary leader that's going out and trying to bring forward the success of the strategic plan, but then also looking towards and looking beyond that to see what are the next opportunities that can really enhance the educational opportunity or the educational outcomes for our children. But you can't do that if you don't have a strong senior leadership team. And from what I could see, from what I've already sensed is that we have that here already, so I wouldn't have to. But if you didn't have that, you would then have to really micromanage and dive in, and that would stop you from being out in the community. If I had to choose one over the other, I would choose diving deep into a central office and into the school system if and only if we didn't have the competent leaders that we need. I see that we have that. I'm about 99% sure that we do. So I think that I wouldn't have to choose. I would be able to go out and do that work of connecting the district with the community, looking for other opportunities to bring back to the school district while keeping my pulse on what's happening in the district.
BVSD has several schools with dual immersion programs in elementary schools, and this effort is moving into the middle schools. However, one critique that is coming up is that these immersion programs benefit English dominant students who are learning Spanish, not Spanish dominant students who are learning English. How could you, as our district's leader, reimagine effective dual immersion programs that benefit both Spanish and English learners?
I guess the first thing I would do is I would question that assumption to see where it's coming from. Because I've led dual language schools, and I don't necessarily see that it's benefiting only the English language. I see great benefits when done right. I see great benefits more so for the native language learners as they learn the English language and strengthening without losing their native language skills. The problem, I wouldn't say the problem, but I think not a problem. What people need to understand is that it takes a little bit longer. So it takes 5 to 6 years. And so you're not going to see that surge in performance and grade level scores until maybe 6th or 7th grade. I was over at Pioneer. I was over at Pioneer today, but they stop at 5th grade, and they don't have a path for those 5th graders to go into 6th or 8th grade. That was a question that I had. The only reason I was questioning that is because I think we need to have a goal around the seal of biliteracy and how many of our students are graduating high school with that seal of biliteracy. And if we make that if that becomes a priority, then we have to have clear pathways from K-12 for Spanish instruction and dual language. I think also we have a limited amount of schools that are doing dual language, and trying to connect them with schools across the state and schools across the country, so there's even more thought partners that they could discuss to see how to improve and how to work within the system that we have. But the first thing I would do is I would argue that assertion, and I really ask for that in data to show me that it's not benefiting, or it's benefiting one and not the other.
BVSD voters and taxpayers are equitable, the most generous in Colorado. How would you assure BVSD voters and taxpayers that BVSD is a good steward of the dollars entrusted to BVSD?
Well, I think it's all about that quality profile of a child and making sure that we are producing exactly what they're paying for. So essentially, they're committing their dollars and their trust into the school system because the school system is continually pushing out and creating some of the leaders in this country. and just high-quality instruction. I think one thing we could do is look at closing that achievement gap. I think voters and taxpayers would be happy to know that we are serious about that and that we're using our resources wisely to create that. I think everybody wants to be on the cutting edge and everybody wants to be, leading in innovation areas, but I think those are superficial at times. We don't want to be innovative just to be innovative. We want to create innovative practices for our children that are leading to accelerated growth scores and an accelerated achievement. So I think, the struggle is it is going to take a lot of work. You have a 92% four-year graduation rate. How do you get that to 95%? You have, I think, a 0.6% dropout rate. How do you get that to a 0.2? Your average ACT score is 23.3. How do you get that to a 26? And when voters and taxpayers can see that, I think there's more of a willingness for them to continue to invest in the district, continue to say good things about the district, so people will continue to send their children there, even though you may be losing enrollment. And then I think there's other things you could look at to see how we can inspire people to continue to have trust in the district. And essentially it comes down to my desire to become one of the, if not one of, but the best school district in the state. I mean, really, that helps everybody, including your home valuations.
The last question, how would you implement our motto, excellence and equity?
I think it would have to be embedded in everything that we do. And when you talk about your motto, excellence and equity, how have you operationalized that? What does that mean? And so it has to be embedded in every part of the school district. Excellence and equity in transportation, excellence and equity in cleanliness, excellence and equity in sports, excellence and equity in academics. It can't just be one area, because all these areas come together to support our children. And so again, I think we have to have that conversation around equity, and also what excellence is. Do we feel right now that we're good? Do we feel that we're great? Do we feel that they're excellent? Do we feel that we're phenomenal? And get a true understanding, and really, to me, I need to understand exactly what excellence means. And then once we have that sound understanding of what excellence is, I'm going to push you to aspire for more.
That was it?
That's it.
So thank you all for coming. If you could take a few minutes and finish filling out the green form.